In Belgrade, as everywhere in the region, these days people have started to drink, some with whiskey and some with vodka. Everyone wants to eat, drink, and get drunk for the New Year's Eve, and no one wants to deal with protests and strikes, at least not until after the Serbian New Year, which falls on January 7th. It is now known that in Serbia, the government accuses the opposition of exercising violence, united around the motto Serbia against violence. This seems like an attempt by the government to drain all the energy of the anticipated resistance, in a big public party, thus aligning it with the festive atmosphere. Meanwhile, from the anticipated popular strike and resistance in defense of the stolen vote, only the opposition leader Marinka Tepic remains, who despite the doctor's recommendation, refuses to end the strike. Browsing the Serbian media, including those of the opposition, the resistance seems completely unreal in the wake of the last days of the year. The influx of voters from Bosnia and Herzegovina and Kosovo brought another mandate to the Serbian president's party, while the anticipated strike has been engulfed by the festive end-of-year atmosphere, just like the cartel on the Sava River has been engulfed in these days. This cartel was just a floating cafe, a nightclub-adapted ferry, where, in the absence of safety measures, it sank. That's what the place was called. It wasn't about the Serbian cartels that dominate the region. The local administration has warned that it plans to close some of them, for not respecting the standards for this kind of nightlife venues, where it is rumored to be so popular that not even the ground could hold it, let alone the pockets of ordinary citizens, who live off their wages. There was a predicted major political crisis and dilemma as to whether the current president will survive this turbulence. Wishes were accompanied by ideas that this crisis could overthrow him from power, just as it happened to former President Slobodan Milosevic. Some might say this was a small turbulence, and some might say this is how big changes start, with a group protesting and making impossible demands. Only when the demands are impossible can fate turn, as real demands lead to compromise, and compromise doesn't change the situation. So, if there will be changes, demand the impossible. Former Serbian President Slobodan Milosevic, before falling, was accused of vote theft. Popular revolt, aided by the West, ousted him from power, then with an escort. They handed him over to The Hague as a suspect for war crimes. As is known, he didn't wait for the court's judgment, he died in prison. His arrest and transfer to The Hague were a shock for Serbian society at that time, as the elites there were not yet ready for changes. The academia, the church, and the politics were not prepared for a change of the anti-Western course that Serbian society had taken to survive, and in an attempt to redraw, with the blood of unprotected peoples, the borders of Greater Serbia in the void left by the dissolution of Yugoslavia. But the replacement of Milosevic with a pro-Western did not bring a democratic society, but after a few years, it brought the conservative Serb authorities to power, who quickly not only eliminated the former pro-Western Prime Minister Djindjic but also the idea of a European Serbia. The arrival of Tomislav Nikolic and later Aleksandar Vučić was a similar compromise, ideologically, for an Eastern Serbia that would look Western, conceived as something in between, as an attempt to take on the former role of neither East nor West that Tito's former Yugoslavia had. But Vučić does not have the charisma of the former communist dictator, so to compensate, he talks until he loses his point. Indeed, the current Serbian president plays this card in the relationship between Europe and Russia, serving as a bridge, an intermediary, and whatever is needed in the tense relationship between Russia and the West. Similarly, the family of the current president and the family of the prime minister in 2 mandates, Brnabic, are also talked about. Their predicted downfall by the opposition is presented as the downfall of crime cartels, but it seems like the only cartel that fell in Belgrade these days is the sinking of the floating cafe named Cartel.